Hot on the heels of our Silent Hill video, we're cashing in on the other survival horror franchise, Resident Evil. To celebrate the release of the Resident Evil 2 remake on Nintendo Switch, join us as we take a look at the story behind Resident Evil 2. Roll those credits. Resident Evil's been on a roll, huh? Resident Evil 7 reinvented the franchise successfully by aping PT's presentation, and Resident Evil 8 was another certified banger, and the remakes of Resident Evil 2 and 3 did a great job of modernizing what is considered by many to be the pinnacle of not just the series, but of the survival horror genre in general. Despite its notoriously bad voice acting, 1996's Resident Evil on the original PlayStation has earned a place in the hallowed halls of video game history. It set the standard for gameplay and graphics on the console and became the blueprint for many other survival horror games, including Silent Hill, which was released more than 3 years later. Before Resident Evil even hit store shelves, Capcom knew they had a hit on their hands. The company went so far as to greenlight and begin development on its sequel, just 1 month after work was completed on the first entry. Shinji Mikami, the now legendary game director responsible for the first game, returned to produce Resident Evil 2, but the directorial reins were handed over to a young Hideki Kamiya. This is the very same man who brought us hyper-character action games like Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, and Beautiful Joe. Resident Evil 2 was one of his earliest works, but you could tell even from the beginning that this guy is a total badass. Seriously, just look at him. Due to constant creative disagreements, Shinji Mikami took a back seat on production partway through development, demanding to only be updated on progress once a month. Production continued under the direction of Papa Kamiya, but unfortunately, this version of Resident Evil 2 would never see the light of day. The game's director had this version of the game scrapped at roughly 80% completed, and he smugly refers to it as Resident Evil 1.5. That's a lot of work money to throw away. But Kamiya believed that the game was dull in its previous form and wouldn't have reached his standard of quality by the expected release date. With Resident Evil 1.5 safely yeeted into the garbage can, Kamiya and his team got down to business making what would be the final version of Resident Evil 2. This time, instead of utilizing the same presentation as the first game, Kamiya envisioned a more Hollywood-style story and presentation as a means of attracting more gamers. One incredibly important feature of Resident Evil 2 that wasn't present in its original incarnation was the zapping system, which allowed for choices made in the Leon playthrough to affect the events in the Claire playthrough. Even for its time, the zapping system was pretty novel and impressive, and you would probably never be able to guess what inspired it. Back to the Future Part 2. That's right, Doc and Marty. The whole shebang is responsible for Resident Evil 2's innovative mechanic. The Resident Evil 2 development team thought that the process of showing the events from the first film from a different angle and watching them play out slightly differently was cool and unique, and wanted to use that idea for their game. Scrapping the original game definitely set the project back, but the results are difficult to argue with. Originally slated for a May 1997 release, Resident Evil 2 ultimately shipped in its complete form in January 1998. To apologize for the delay, a playable preview of Resident Evil 2 was included in Resident Evil Director's Cut, the extended version of the original game. Fans must not have been too upset about the delay though, because Resident Evil 2 topped the records set by Final Fantasy VII and Super Mario 64 and made it the fastest selling video game release in North America at the time. And the rest, as they say, is history. That original version of Resident Evil 2 is undoubtedly a classic, but Capcom decided to return to it with a modernized remake in 2019. Remaking a 20-year-old game is dicey enough in its own right, but the Resident Evil 2 remake was incredibly well received and has sold as many as 10 million as of 2022. So what's your favorite Resident Evil game? Let us know in the comments, but remember to just be cool, right? And while you're here, why don't you check out our essay and explore with us how Kratos went from Greek guillotine to Norse nurturer. And if you like Resident Evil, you definitely want to stay tuned for our upcoming indie game spotlight on Black Mesa. I'm Mike Golchinski, and I'll see you in the next video.